couple topics here, and just a little bit about my background again. So I was in-house at FP&A, so came up through the FP&A ranks in the airline industry, then got into software back in the early 2000s, on-premise software, perpetual maintenance, all that good stuff. Rose up through the ranks to SaaS CFO at founder-owned and private equity-backed businesses, and a couple years ago launched my own services, so do fractional CFO work, coaching, and teach courses, have a podcast, have a SaaS news site, so talk to tons of folks. And, the first thing is, what is ARR? And you're probably going to think, like, all right, Ben, we know this. Like, why would you talk about this? But I talk to a lot of PE firms. I talk to a lot of companies, coach companies. And even these large PE firms that are well-respected, they're like, we're talking like, hey, let me tell you our definition of ARR. And they throw everything in there. Recurring revenue, usage, everything in there. And is that technically ARR, right? And this is becoming very kind of squishy nowadays. And it's flip this, because there's so many different revenue streams. And I have on here kind of what I say is my modern SaaS P&L. And then SaaS 1.0 was kind of just subscription revenue, right? Services maybe you sell some hardware if there's a point of sale system. Now I'm seeing, say, even managed services. So they got professional services, managed services, subscriptions. And now they're jumping into usage-based processing, transaction, consumption. And it's so important we know for those in finance and accounting, like to get this correct, to get that coding correct because our valuation depends on it. So I'm a big proponent. We can't group, say, subscription revenue with variable revenue with other revenue because when it comes to valuation time, when it comes to our metrics, we've got to separate all that stuff. So that's a big deal now, keeping that distinct. And there's so many definitions of ARR. And I'm also a founding member of the SaaS Metrics Standards Board. And that was kind of the brainchild of Ray Reich of RevUp Squared. And we've kind of taken a position, and of course we're not the all-in all, but to be counted as ARR, if you have any sort of variable revenue without any minimum commitment, that's not ARR. So that's one good discussion topic to agree with that. It's a bit controversial, but if we're being valued off of ARR and we have revenue that can go to zero, is that really fair? So we've taken that stance, that position, that if there are no commitments, there are no minimums, no pricing tiers. I think, do we have a question? Or yeah.
What if you have a minimum commitment? Would you count the full revenue as current or just the minimum?
So you count just the minimum. At least that's the position. So if you have a minimum stated in your contract, that's fair, right? If those third parties, those stakeholders, investors, potential investors are looking at your numbers, if there's a minimum commitment in your contract, we would throw that into the ARR number.
And not everybody would agree with that.
Yeah. So, see, even just, and of course we could talk about this forever, but even just what is ARR, you can have hour-long discussions. And on the standards board, we've got Ray Wright, we've got David Spitz, who is the originator of the KeyBank SaaS survey, the SaaS Metrics survey, who now has his own company. We've got Lauren Kelly, who is the founder of OpEx Engine. She's in the Northeast. And then Todd Gardner, founder of SaaS Capital since exited, and knows Max super well. So we've had huge discussion. We've got Bessemer on the board, others. So we talk about this. If you can probably read for hours, just on these nuances of what is ARR. So that's one great discussion point because it's evolving, right? SaaS pricing is evolving. All that stuff.
Hey, can I borrow your mic? Sure.
Sorry, my marketing people are going to kill me. But on your table, you have these things. These are these rocket books, which, you take notes in them, and then you can hit the QR code. It loads up into the cloud. AI gets applied to it. It gets published as a LinkedIn article, and you get automatic 10,000 followers. Okay. But it is the next gen notebook. So if you want to capture some of these notes that Ben's talking about, what's the definition of ARR? You have your companion as well as the rocket book, and you take it home, and that's what gives to you. So thank you. Excuse me.
I'll take that 10,000 followers. So next, I had this is just kind of analog here. I had some nice video clips too. So for 10x exit, is that still possible in today's climate? And it's getting harder, with the folks I talk to, the bankers I talk to, right? It's still possible. And, when I talk to this banker, actually, he's on my one of my podcast episodes, like, is this still possible? Can you get a 10x exit? If you're founder or majority owner, you just own the company, and if we go to market right now, can we get a 10x exit on ARR? And the big things he said, one, before hitting 10 million was a huge milestone, right? Even hitting just 1 million of ARR is a huge milestone. So 10 million used to be kind of that golden number. You hit 10, that opens you up to all the strategic buyers, all the financial sponsors, everything. Now, he's thinking, now it's kind of moved up a little bit. To get that 10 exit, we want to see maybe closer to 15 million ARR. So maybe that threshold is going higher. That opens you up to that huge universe of buyers to get the 10x. And then the next strong growth, at least 50% growth to get 10x exit. Growth is so subjective. You see, Bessemer, you see all these different benchmarks where they're like, hey, it's 100% or it's 20% or it's 50. But 50%, maybe subjective, but at least 50% growth. And then they want to see you profitable or break even, right? And it seems to be, Penny, they don't want to buy any dumpster fires. They want to come in and fix you. So they want to see a business model that's working to get you that 10x exit. So growth, and then maybe a little higher threshold on ARR, and then you've got a fundamental business model that's working. And then the next thing, of course, I talk SaaS metrics all the time. I teach a course in SaaS metrics, and I asked Jim, who was on my podcast, it's like, all right, do you need green across the board for your SaaS metrics KPIs? And I've got, I think it's the next page is my SaaS metrics framework that I use for my clients, that I implement for them to calculate all their metrics. So do you need a lot of green across the board to get a 10x exit? And the answer is pretty much yes. You need a lot of green, maybe a little bit of yellow, but no red on the board. So if you look at that next page, this is an actual SaaS company. A lot of red on the board, right? That's not going to work. You can't. There's not even anywhere to focus on that because it's so bad. That's just not working for us. Now the next one, this profile gets us closer to 10x. Maybe it's not 10x, but it gets us a little bit closer. So a lot of green on the board. We got a little bit of yellow, little red. And the thing with the yellow, he said, if you have a little yellow on the board, and I benchmark my clients against their B2B peers, so when I talk green, yellow, red, it's looking at their peer data set to see how they're performing versus the market. Not versus their budget, not versus their internal targets. So if they're green, they're performing well against a benchmark that's market driven. So if you do have yellow on the board, how are you going to fix that? Understand it and have a plan to fix it, and you really can't have any red on the board. So if we're looking for that 10x exit, say 10 to 15 million ARR plus a lot of green, or maybe a little yellow on the board, and then pretty much no red. And then the next page is really, this is my 5-pillar SaaS metrics framework that I teach in my course, I implement for my clients. And it moves left to right depending on your stage. If you're Dimitri and 1 million ARR, you're looking more on the left side. If you're 10, 15 million ARR, you're looking more on the right. Actually, you have a metric calculated for each of those boxes. So I implement these metrics, this framework for my clients. I also teach in my course. It also acts as your roadmap if you've not implemented this, of like, what do we need to implement? And it goes left to right. So if you're early stage, you're not going to worry about LTV to CAC yet if you're 30K ARR. But if you're 10 million ARR, you probably do need to calculate your LTV to CAC. So just kind of the roadmap to discovery for moving along our framework. And then the next, fundraising. So through my podcast, I interview SaaS founders who've raised capital. Anywhere, they've been pre-seed up to Series C, pre-revenue to a lot of revenue. And I asked them, one of the questions I asked is just lessons learned in the capital fundraising process. And every single founder has an answer. They always look back and like, if I could do this again, if I could do it better, they have an answer like, what could they have done better to raise capital? And these lessons, after going through 50 podcast interviews, try to synthesize all that data to see like what are those 3 common themes, and there were common themes that they came up with. And the first, that was probably the number one, is founder investor fit. Finding those investors. Every SaaS investor can probably talk about the SaaS business model, but do they know healthcare tech? Do they know communities? They need to believe in your vision. So it's not just the SaaS business model, but they need to know your niche. And then your milestones. Like when you raise that money, what are those milestones you're going to go after? Those concrete milestones. Is it users? Is it activations? Is it revenue? Because your milestones could be different than what your investors want. They're thinking maybe market value. You're thinking just, like that they uploaded the logo to the platform. So having that alignment with those investors. And then finally, storytelling came up, whether you're raising $100 million or $1 million, storytelling was always on the board. Always on the board. So whether you're pre-seed and just selling on vision, or even, if you're 50 million revenue and raising another round, now the numbers support it. So it starts with your vision, storytelling, and then eventually your numbers have to support that vision and the story that you're telling. So that came up, even interviewing CFOs, at large companies, always storytelling. And then, through my SaaS side, I've just got some data in here on average round sizes for like seed rounds, Series A, Series B, Series C. So I calculate, the min, median, max, and it just gives, a help. It's not valuations, but it just gives a helpful range. Like if you're a founder raising money for the first time, you're going after a seed. It's like, should I ask for 500K? 5 million, 10 million? What is that kind of range just to help you out, with those average round sizes? And then finally is the CFO tech stack. And I run a survey every year. This is now my 4th annual tech stack report, because I have people coming to me and asking, hey Ben, what should I use for accounting? What should I use for FP&A? What should I use for invoicing? What should I use for revenue? All these things. So I was like, hey, I should just survey my newsletter, create a tech stack report. So I had almost 400 respondents this year, and I kind of put it into that bubble market map thing. But actually, this is not a market map. And when I post this to LinkedIn, everybody's like, you're missing my software, you're missing my software. And it's like, no, this is not a market map. This is not me just saying, here's what I see in the market. This is what people are actually using in the market. So I said, what do you, so other people can know in SaaS, because each industry is different, right? SAP, you see a lot of manufacturing, and SaaS, it's completely different. Say, for example, accounting software, it's Sage, it's NetSuite, it's Xero, and QuickBooks. Top 4 guys, year in, year out. That's it. Now there's some other players coming in, but just to help us out, now I've expanded into the sales compensation software, to contracting software. All of this software that's now interfacing with the back office, with finance and accounting, we've got to be aware of this. So just like Dev has their product roadmap, CFOs have to have their own product roadmap too. How are we evolving that tech stack to scale with the board so we can keep pace? So it's really important. It's changing all the time. And interesting, this consolidate or best of breed. I asked my guys, in the survey, because you hear a lot, spendful guys, should we consolidate? Should we get rid of software? Should we just go ERP? But my survey still says they still want best point solutions, so those best of breed point solutions. You can see that, and I have by ARR size. So it's not even just the big guys who are trying to consolidate their ERP. It's across ARR size where they're saying, hey, I'll take the best of breed point solution if it's going to do the job for me. So at least that's what the data says. So super important, tech stack so important. One last thought here. I've got a client right now, he's going through due diligence with some private equity firms, approaching 10 million ARR. He's getting bids, getting analyzed right now as we speak, and we are trying to produce their MRR schedule. And his accounting firm built their own revenue engine. Yeah, right? And it's a bit painful right now, a bit painful. And just like the question, what is ARR? Founders, finance teams, can you produce a simple MRR schedule that is accurate? Can you produce it by product, by geo, whatever that segment is? Because it seems like it should be simple, but it's not always simple. And you have different currencies that you're invoicing in. That makes it more complicated. So just, it's so apparent when you get to due diligence how important your tech stack is, your data, your technology. And, just that's, I think, a pitiful lesson that he's learning that, should have gone with, technology that is meant to do the job. So, a little plug for my friends there. But it's so important, and I'm living this right now. So just those 4 points, 10x exit, what is ARR, fundraising lessons, and then the tech stack roadmap. And so I think we'll be discussing these at the
Yeah, good. Yeah, right on.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.
Big round of applause to Ben.
Yeah.
That was a an enormous amount of information in a very small period of time. But appreciate you sharing all your lessons. And the thing I was thinking about, there was a quote from actually a law firm, well-established M&A law firm. Who was it, Chris, that did the deal with you guys and SAS Optics? Yeah, and they said the number one deal killer is actually accounting errors. And it comes down to when VCs and PEs go in and try to figure out the ARR and say, wait, this doesn't match, and what happens? I thought that was really, really interesting in terms of what you were describing. And that leads to this whole idea of, one, you got to start with the definition of ARR. You got to have an understanding what the metrics are, right? Clarity and consistency. You got to have technology to deploy. So what we'd love for you all to do now is pick one of those topics, have a conversation about it, debate it. Like ARR sounds like it's going to go there. Yes, sir. Oh, of course.
How do you define LTV?
How do you define LTV?
LTV?
Yeah.
LTV calculation,
So it depends on your revenue, right? Are you subscription? Do you have usage based? I have LTV and LTV plus. So subscription, right? I look at my cohort ARPA, so those newly acquired customers, it's not my entire customer base. So newly acquired customers, what's the average that they're paying? I gross margin adjusted by the appropriate margin and divide by dollar churn, not logo churn. Now, if you have variable revenue, we have to have an estimate, in my opinion, of the variable revenue that comes along for the ride with the subscription revenue. And that's why metrics are harder than they seem, right? Because there's so many nuances. But simply, I just take because I've got clients with this case, I take an estimate of the attachment of the variable revenue, and I add that into my LTV calculation, and I also adjust my CAC payback period calculation.
basically, gross margins and utilization divided by the
Right.
With the SaaS Metrics Board and multiple folks on the board who are representing VCs, we've seen more of the VCs looking for the standard basket of metrics versus the different variations.
Can you repeat the question?
Repeat the question.
Yeah. So I think
Here.
Yeah, I'm sorry. With the standard metrics board and having a number of VC firms represented on there, are you starting to see that in the due diligence process, more VCs are kind of coalescing around the standards board and how the standards board is representing these metrics?
I think there are two thoughts on that. One, right, for due diligence, they want to know when a metric is presented that this is what it means, right? So it helps with due diligence, so you don't have to figure out what's the formula with data that they're using. And also that we're finding, and I'm working with PE firms of just standardizing metrics, right? You have a portfolio, you got 50 SaaS companies, they're all calculating CAC differently. So working with PE firms to try to standardize even just across their portfolio. So I think it's whether it's through software, you're looking at CAC payback, or you're doing due diligence, it's trying to at least have some semblance that if it says like, hey, we're going by the standards definition, you know what you're getting. Of course, there are tons of nuances, but
Yeah, and I look on the financial statement side. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a CFO, but it's sort of like you're arguing over whether you put customer success above the line or below the line, and everyone goes, "What do you mean?" Right? But on the financial operating metrics, right, the SaaS operating metrics, it's the Wild Wild West. Everybody has different definitions. And so I do think what Chris, our COO, has talked about is this idea. One of the most important things is for your company is to have a metrics policy, right? And with that metrics policy and having that aligned with the VC and saying this is how we define it. So we had an interesting conversation with our VC, or well, it's a VC, but it's majority owned. Churn versus punitive churn. How do you think about that? Gross retention and gross punitive retention, and how do you represent it? And we were punishing ourselves because we were putting in contraction, and they were like, no, we just care about loss. I was like, come on, you're killing me, right? But not having alignment on the metrics policy out of the gate led to some confusion in terms of how the business was being represented. So I think it's more around whatever the definition is with the people that are giving you the money, you can align with that. Good?
yeah, good.
All right. So have a great dinner, have a conversation, we'll have someone stand up.